This happened 3 years ago, on Christmas Eve. My husband and I were spending the evening with my side of the family. The party was at my grandparents' house, my childhood home, and I never liked the place. We were only there out of obligation, as these are not good people. All night, they kept giving us the same passive-aggressive, slightly unnerving plasticky behavior. My grandmother wanted us to go upstairs to see the rooms, whatever that means, and I knew they hadn't changed since I lived there. People eventually started going home, and my grandmother was still pestering us to go check out the upstairs. Eventually, everyone was gone, except for my mother, grandparents, and my husband and I. My grandmother really wanted us to head upstairs now. My husband and I went to check out the upstairs alone, while everyone else stayed downstairs. We were chatting as we went from room to room, and found that nothing much had changed in any of them, until we got to my grandfather's upstairs office, and were hit with the overwhelming smell of decay. Not like grocery meat, but the distinct smell of a whole animal or body. Meat, innards, bowels. It couldn't have been anything small. Something at least medium dog-sized. We continued our conversation normally, so as not to make a scene while we carefully looked around. In the end, we couldn't find anything. After our 2-minute tour, we headed for the stairs, keeping casual as though nothing was wrong, still chatting. But I was intent upon bringing up that smell. As we reached the top of the staircase, we immediately found all 3 of them, Mom and grandparents, standing very quiet and very still, staring up the staircase. Remembering the look in their eyes, it almost looked as though they were trying to read us for something. It looked pretty malicious. In that moment, I remembered how badly my grandmother had wanted us to go upstairs. All 3 went into immediate plastic mode, acting like nothing had happened. We noped straight out of there, and I never did bring up the smell. This ended up being the last straw situation that finally drove me to cut off contact with them, and I haven't spoken to any of them since. When I was 16, I wasn't super religious, but I'd frequently go to youth group as I was good friends with everyone there. We would always play games before we started discussions and stuff. I wasn't super into the games, unless it was anything involving hiding. In one of the church's childcare rooms is a smaller room with a 2-way mirror. I have no idea why there was a 2-way mirror in there, but I thought it was the coolest thing ever to hide in there and watch people try to find me. One day in October, they announced they were gonna play some hide-and-go-seek type game. in the dark. They turned off all the lights in the church, and it was around 6 or 7, so it was already pretty dark outside, too. It was pretty much pitch black, unless you were in a room with a window or had your phone out. My first thought? Mirror time. The first thing I did was go to the mirror room and hide in there, and this other dude came with me. He soon got spooked and decided to leave, but I stayed. I watched several people come into the childcare room. I could see them, but they couldn't see me, and they didn't find me. 10 minutes or so passed, and I stopped seeing people. I was dumb and didn't realize that they had probably stopped playing. I waited another 5 minutes in there, and figured that I should probably make my way back to the main room, where they do the worship and discussion and all that. As I got up to go, I thought I saw something outside the mirror. It was hard to see, as the only light in the room was from a window that let in a little moonlight. As I squinted my eyes, I saw what looked like a little girl, walking around and picking up toys. I was spooked, but didn't move. I figured she couldn't see me because of the two-way mirror. I stayed there for a while, hoping she would just go away. I started praying, even though I don't believe in that stuff. When suddenly, the little girl looked right at me, right through the mirror. She was wearing this creepy scowl and ran out of the room into the hall. I was scared witless, but I got out of the closet and went out the same door she did, as it was the only exit to the childcare room. I started sprinting towards the main room, hoping not to see anything weird on the way there. I got turned around, as this place was like a maze fully lit, and it was even harder to get around in the dark. Finally, I saw the door to the main room, with light coming from under it. I muttered, "Thank you, Jesus," and sprinted towards the door. As I did, I heard a crying sound coming from behind me. I didn't look back. I just kept running, and I pushed open the door and closed it behind me, safe and sound. Apparently, they had all come back and hadn't even noticed I was gone. I entered the main room through the back while they were singing. No one noticed me get there, except for this one girl, Angelica. She ran the soundboard when the guy who normally did it was gone. We made eye contact, and she looked just as spooked as I was. I figured she must be able to hear the crying coming from outside. I just shook my head and went back to my seat. I learned from her later that she had had a similar experience during one of the games. The thing that bothers me is that I had hid in that mirror room alone like 12 times before that. Never again. I grew up in Alaska. I was born there, and didn't move down to the mainland until I was 12. My mother and father weren't from there, but had been living there for almost a decade before I was born. Anyway, this happened when I was 10. My father and I had just finished a day of visiting some friends of his who live out in the wilderness a bit, and the road home took us through some forest. This is in November, so there's already plenty of snow on the ground, and it's really dark in general. It's also around 10:30 p.m. So he's driving, and I'm in the passenger seat. It's just one 2-lane road with woods on either side. As we're driving, I notice something out of the corner of my eye that makes my heart stop. On the right side of the road, in the trees, briefly illuminated by the headlights, is a man. He's clearly visible between the trees, lumbering quickly through the snow towards the road with his arms stretched out. Not in a menacing way. It's like he's desperately trying to reach us. Jesus Christ, his face. He looked almost frozen, his beard covered in ice. His eyes were wild, sunken in. His mouth was opened in what seemed like a silent scream. I immediately screamed as the car passed by him, covering my face in my hands. My dad looked at me and asked me what was wrong. All I could get out was that there was a man trying to get to us on my side of the road. My dad put the car in reverse, while locking the doors and pulling his Glock out of the glove box. We quickly get back to where I saw him, and he's gone. There aren't even any tracks in the snow. My dad slightly rolls his window down and calls out, "Does anyone need help?" No one answers, so we drive away. My dad is wearing a grimace now, and it's my turn to ask him what's wrong. He replies, puzzled, that he feels really sad, but he has no idea why. He assures me that I must have seen a tree and mistaken it for a person. We get home about half an hour later. My mom is already sleeping, but I'm not tired whatsoever, so I get some stale coffee out of the pot. I'm not supposed to drink coffee, especially at night. My father sits by me and asks if I wanted to stay up because I was scared of what I thought I saw. I tell him that I did see a scary guy in the trees. He humors me and asks me to describe the man. I describe him as best I could, and my father's face goes white. He wakes my mother up and asks her if she's ever shown me a picture of Mark. She hadn't, and I didn't know any Mark. My dad comes out of the room with a picture and asks me if it's the man I saw. I immediately reply in the affirmative. It's the man from the woods, although much healthier, in high spirits next to my dad. Mark had been a good friend to my father, and had died a year after I was born. Nobody ever told me about him. He went missing, and was found weeks later in the woods, after his car was discovered on the side of the road. He had frozen to death, 5 miles from his car. no one knows if he got lost or if he went out there to die. My dad hugs me tight for several minutes, then helps himself to some coffee. My mother is brought up to speed and is understandably freaked out. The three of us stay up all night together watching Arnold Schwarzenegger movies to take our minds off of it. My father doesn't like talking about it, but he won't refuse to, and he admits it made him a believer in the paranormal. I'm reminded of the only time I was trapped in a whiteout, all alone. It happened on a Wednesday a couple of years ago. It was in the American South, so no one was prepared. My wife was 6 hours away with her parents. I planned to meet her, but had to work until Friday. Within 10 minutes, my boss called and canceled work. In 20 minutes, the power went out. And in 30 minutes, the driveway and road were solid ice. After an hour, the house was freezing. I was sitting in the dark, wrapped in a blanket. I could hear the wind, but mostly, all I heard was my ears ringing from the sheer silence. The house was pitch black, all except for the lantern I was using to illuminate my small area. I was saving my phone battery, and my laptop was dead. After a few hours, my thoughts started to get to me. I thought I could hear whispers outside my bedroom. I went out and started to hear them downstairs. I chased the whispers to the basement, and then began to hear them upstairs. I went back to my bedroom and curled up in bed around the lantern until dawn. I'd read a book during the day. This cycle continued for 3 whole days. I was spending the weekend at a friend's house. He had moved in about a month before, and I was helping him with some renovations. I saw that he had a bottle of ZzzQuil in his room, and I asked him if he was having trouble sleeping. He told me that he was, but that he wasn't taking the ZzzQuil anymore. I asked him why, and he said I should take some that night and see for myself. He then wrote something on a small piece of paper, folded it, and handed it to me, then told me not to open it until morning. He told me that this was his proof. Curious, I took the ZzzQuil that night. He told me to sleep in his room, and that he would take the guest room. His room had a deadbolt that could only be opened from the inside. When I fell asleep, I had some really weird dreams, and woke up at about 1:30 a.m. I checked the time on my phone and rolled back onto the bed, when suddenly I saw a little boy crouching down by the opposite side of the bed. I could only see his little hands and the top of his head from the nose up. He was watching me intently. There was nothing overtly wrong with him, but something was just off. I figured it was a hallucination, or just a really vivid dream. I somehow knocked out shortly after. In the morning, I told my friend about the weird dream, and told him ZzzQuil is a messed up drug. My friend then told me to get the paper he had given me. I pulled it out of my wallet and unfolded it. Scribbled on the page were the words, "Do you see the little boy watching you too?" I got a really weird feeling. I tried to rationalize it and say it was a hallucination, but I admitted it was pretty odd that we had both seen the same thing so clearly. My friend's eyes turned glassy. I had never seen him like this before. In a low voice, he told me that it wasn't a hallucination. He explained that he had been seeing the boy every night for several days when he was on the ZzzQuil, but saw nothing when he didn't take it. He told me that he no longer thought it was a hallucination. Rather, that the drug has some effect on the brain that, when we wake disoriented in the wee hours of the morning, just lets us see what's always been there. I'm the type of person that gets spooked really easily. Like, even when people mention scary situations or imagine if type things, my eyes get watery and I get goosebumps. 2 weeks ago, on Saturday, it was late at night, around 1 a.m., and I was coming home from hanging out with my friends. I went to the kitchen, grabbed a snack, then took the dog out through the back kitchen door for a late-night piss. The dining room is next to the kitchen, separated by a big metal door. I was giving the dog some water when I heard my mom on the other side of the door. "Next time tell me when you're back. I don't want to stay up worried about you." "I know, Mom. Whatever." I open the door, and there's nothing there. Just the darkness of the empty dining room. I go and check her room, and there she is, right asleep. I go upstairs and find that the bathroom light is on. It's locked, so I knock, and my little brother, who's 7 years old, is in there. He seems terrified and tells me, "I heard Mommy in my room, but she wasn't there." I took him into my room with me and let him sleep there. The next morning, I told my mom about what happened when she asked why I let my brother sleep in my room. When I explained why, she told me that she sometimes hears me talking in the dining room, but when she checks, I'm not there. Sometimes I'm not even home. I got goosebumps, and from then on, I don't go down there at night anymore. My mom said that the last time she heard me talking was last Saturday morning, talking about how I was going to buy some horse and ride it to the mountains. But Saturday, I wasn't even home at all until 8 p.m.